Okay, let's start this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to attend this International Creating Value from Legumes webinar today. My name is Sari Ivonen, and I'm very pleased to chair this webinar today. I'm head of Finnish Organic Research Institute, which is actually a research network operating under the auspices of University of Helsinki and Luke Natural Resources Institute, Finland. We are going to have a very interesting program today. Experts from different countries around Europe shall lecture about farming, processing, and consumption of legumes. There is one short break in our program, 5 minutes at 10:40. And our webinar will end 12 o'clock. This webinar is organized in collaboration with several research projects, research teams, and organizations. Logos on the top of the slide represent organizations and projects as well as funding bodies behind this webinar. Finally, I would like to remind you of webinar etiquette. Please turn off your webcam unless presenting, mute your mic unless presenting, and use only chat for questions and comments. So chat questions are welcome all the time, and I will pick up questions for presenters. Most of our presentations are recorded beforehand, but the speakers are online, so they can answer your questions. And questions can be answered in chat as well. Okay, now we are ready to start our webinar, and first speaker will be Frederick Stoddard, and he will give us an opening speech. Please, Fred, floor is yours. I will stop sharing this slide now. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be starting this webinar today. I will be telling you about the current status of legumes in Finland and in Europe. My name is Fred Stoddard, and I work in the Department of Agricultural Sciences at the University of Helsinki. Legumes provide all kinds of things for society. They provide food and feed. They also can provide fiber and fuel. And they're good for the environment. They're good for pollinators, as you can see the bee here collecting pollen from the faba bean flower. They can fix their own nitrogen in collaboration with bacteria in their root nodules, so they don't need much fertilizer. And in various ways, they promote the health of the soil in which they grow. So why don't we use them better, especially in Europe? Europe's meat production is fully dependent on soy imports, especially cheap soy imports. And its import of soy is entirely dependent on its increased demand for meat. This graph shows you how the production of ruminant meat, which uses very little soy, has stayed constant over 60 years. Poultry meat has increased fourfold and pig meat has doubled. The dotted line shows you the steady increase until just a few years ago in soy imports, up to about 40 million tons of bean equivalent per year. It's settled back a bit now to 35. And the little black line at the bottom shows you the production of all kinds of grain legumes, including soy, in Europe over the last 60 years, and it doesn't seem to go very far. So Europe imports a lot of soy and it uses this to supplement the feeds of pigs and chickens. The imported soy represents 70% of the supplemental protein fed to livestock throughout the European Union. This figure is as high as 85% in Finland. For Europe as a whole, this represents 13.5 million hectares of land in America, Brazil, Argentina. But things are going to get tougher. China's imports of soy have increased steadily for 20 years and are now above 80 million tons per year. So there's competition in the world market for a limited amount of soy. And less than 1% of imported soy goes directly into food. All the rest of it goes into feed. So in 2013, we spoke to the European Parliament about protein crops, particularly grain legumes, in the then revision of the Common Agricultural Policy. And the result was increased legume production in most countries of Europe. Between 2009 and 2019, areas and production both roughly doubled, which we thought was a pretty good outcome. Here in Finland, the situation is this. Areas of pea have been pretty consistent for many decades because of the demand for the Thursday pea soup in schools, work cafeterias, and all over the country. Fava bean was much less used until a feed manufacturer in 2009 decided it wanted to try to wean itself off imported soy. So it contract grew about 10,000 hectares of beans. And there the situation stood for a couple of years while that feed manufacturer figured out how to compound, how to use the feed. And then you can see the next kick up in area in 2013 with the revised CAP that promoted legume growth throughout the farming system. And then it has settled down again. Average yields in Finland, as in the rest of Europe, have not really increased much. You can see how pea yields have been pretty static over the period of this graph. Fava bean yields fell particularly in 2018 because of a severe drought that affected it more than pea in that year. So what are the limitations restricting the use of legumes in Finnish agriculture in particular and European agriculture in general? Well, the first one is that weed control is hard. We don't have enough effective chemicals or effective mechanical tools to control weeds in the grain legumes. And the legumes are not very good competitors with weeds, especially at the start of the growing season. In contrast, the range of tools available for cereals is very wide. In addition, because the cereals are mainstream crops and legumes are niche crops, there has been relatively little effort devoted to improving the genetic tolerance or resistance to diseases and stresses in this group of crops. We need to play catch up. Finland suffers from extremes of weather. We had a very cold and wet July after an extremely dry June this year. 2017 was cold and wet throughout the summer. This affects all crops, not just the legumes, but because the legumes are niche crops grown by a few farmers, the effects seem to be felt more strongly. There's a novelty factor. Crops that are new to farmers require some learning. In Germany, a group of farmers found that the first year they grew fava bean, the yields were 30% less than when they had 5 years of experience. Similarly, in France, some soybean farmers found that they got 25% better yields 5 years after they started to grow the crops. The price is too low. the feed protein, the price is determined by the price of feed protein, and that in turn is determined by the price of soy on world markets, although that may be pushed up because of the increasing competition from China. At the moment, it is low, and it doesn't pay a farmer, especially when they are getting low yields on the learning curve. And finally, many farmers and agricultural advisors don't know how well to evaluate the break crop effect, the benefit to the following cereal crop from having grown a legume and its effect on reduced cereal diseases. So we can imagine a recipe for success. Step one is to improve paths for communication among farmers. Farmers like to hear from each other what works and what doesn't, and that's fair enough. There needs to be a little more attention to detail, both when people in the ivory tower talk to farmers and farm advisors, and when farmers talk to each other. Legumes have strong soil requirements that the cereals don't. Faba bean needs a moisture retentive soil rather than one that is prone to drought. Lupin, in contrast, benefits from a very well-drained acid soil, and these two types of crops will not flourish on the opposite kind of soil. A little more thinking outside the box is needed. One of the feed companies has found that if it uses oat instead of barley as the cereal, then it can use faba bean instead of soy as the legume in its pig feeds. This is a very exciting outcome, and now that company reckons that 80,000 hectares of faba bean in Finland, only 4% of the arable area, would provide all the beans needed to feed the national pig flock. At the same time, there is dietary change. There are new food uses being developed all the time. People are eating more plant protein and possibly a little less animal protein. So in Europe, so these changes can lead to reduced need for imported protein or substitute protein for feed, and perhaps a little increased use for food. We need to continue investing in public sector science for such aspects as how legumes resist or tolerate stresses and diseases, because the profits of these niche crops are generally too low for investment by private companies. By the same token, a little more support to farmers from the Common Agricultural Policy or from national governments would be welcome, especially when farmers are learning how to grow these crops. And finally, we need a bit of patience. Experience in many countries shows that the uptake of novel crops is slow and stepwise. A few farmers take it on, they learn how to grow it, and then the ripples move out. Another batch of farmers takes things up, and so on. We can't change the whole cropping system of a country overnight. So to conclude, I like to say that legumes are good for lots of things. They're good for food and feed. They're good for the soil and pollinators. They're good for crop rotations. But they are challenging if the farmer hasn't grown them before and their price is still too low. And with that, I thank you for your attention and turn you over to the rest of the webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred, for opening speech. It was very informative introduction to this topic today, and we can go to next presentation. Next speaker will be Ulrich Quendt from Germany. And the title of Ulrich's presentation is Demonstration and Knowledge Transfer Network for Expanding and Improving Cultivation and Utilization of Field Peas and Beans in Germany. Please, Ulrich, floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me to give you a presentation about the demonstration and knowledge transfer network in Germany. And I'm the coordinator of this network. And we aim to expand and improve the cultivation and utilization of field pea and field bean in Germany. This project consists of 16 project partners across the whole Germany. And from these partners are from extension services, governmental, agricultural organizations, and research institutions. And the project is funded by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Germany. First, I want to give you an overview or an insight how we work in this network and also to the current situation of legumes in Germany. And second, I want to present you some examples for utilizing legumes in the feed and food sector. In Germany, we have a protein crop strategy. This is a strategy of the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Germany. And there, under this roof, there are different initiatives to expand and to improve the production of homegrown protein crops. And to these initiatives belongs these demonstration networks for pea, bean, soy, lupin, and also for the forage legumes. With this protein crop strategy, we got an increase in the cropping area of grain legumes from 2014 to 2020 in Germany, from 90,000 hectares to up to 200,000 hectares. The steepest increase we had in field pea and fiber beans and also in soybeans. And soybean is a new species for grain legumes in Germany. So statistics started only in 2016. And we see that we have a change in the agriculture area from fiber beans to soybeans because soybeans are more adapted to warmer and drier conditions. Here you can see our farm demonstration network. It's also across the whole Germany and consists of conventional and organic farms. And here we have the knowledge what we can spread to other farmers, the knowledge of how to grow and how to utilize pea and bean. We organize field days and farm visits with these demonstration farms, and also we gather economic and agricultural data of these farms. Production is one thing. You can increase the production, but increasing the production is not enough to developing a sustainable market for grain legumes. So for this, you need all actors of the value chain. So that is why we include all actors from breeders over the farmer to the processors and the marketing and also to the consumer in our project. And we try to work with all these actors and have different measurements to work with these actors. Here we have a questionnaire. With this questionnaire, we started the project and asked farmers, why do you crop pea and bean? And the most reasons for conventional demonstration farms was loosening up tight crop rotations, production of GMO-free and local protein feed, and also subsidies and other monetary incentives, yes, but also N2 fixation, improving soil fertility, and pre-crop effects. And also avoidance of resistance. So if you have these tight crop rotations, you have problems with resistance of some herbicides. Here you can see the yield of bean and bean cereal mixtures in Germany over different years. And on the left side we have the conventional bean yield, and in the middle the organic bean yield. And on the right side we have the organic bean yield in mixtures. So that's the total it's the total yield of this mixture. It's not only bean. But what you can see here is the huge yield gap between the conventionals and the organic. This is what we see in Germany, is that the conventional usually harvest more than the organics. But what we can also see is that we crop beans with cereals, we get a better yield, a better total yield of this mixture. Here we have the pea yield. At first the conventionals and then the organics, and on the right side the mixture, the yield of the total of this mixture of pea and cereals. And we see here also the difference between the conventional and the organics. And we have with peas high yields by the organic, by the conventionals, from 50 to 70 in the maximum, and but also from 15 to 20 in the minimum. So that is what we also have on the demonstration front. It's very volatile yields, and we actually have no answer at the moment why we have these volatile yields. Maybe we can discuss this in the end of the presentation. But I want to show you here is the interesting thing that we can increase the yield for peas with this crop mixture cropping. Here we see the production and use of grain legumes in Germany for the year 2015 and 2017. And we see an increase in the production of from 300,000 tons to 500,000 tons. And what you can see also here is that the most use of grain legumes is in hofeigenes Futter. That means that these grain legumes is not sold to the market. It's directly used in farm-owned feed. So the reason for this is that the farmer get the best price for these grain legumes on its own farm. If he sell it to the market, they get a lower price. It's €5 less than per deciton than if he would sell it to the market. So here we have a good example for using pea and feed rations for pig meat production. So this is a farm. They use their own pea and their own feed rations from 50% up to 27%. If you ask a usual advisor, they would not advise any pea in the ration due to any anti-nutritive contents. But here we can see it's quite easy, or it's possible to use P in feed rations. In Germany, we have a label. It's called Without GMO, and this label is an incentive to produce without GMO. And grain legumes are GMO free, and if the farmer put homegrown grain legumes in the feed ration, then they can sell their products, their meat, with this label without GMO, and they get a better price for this labeling, because this 75% of the consumer want to buy food without GMO. So here we come to the food market. Just to give you an overview about these regions of species and forms of grain legumes. So, and also within a species like peas, we have different varieties of these peas. So we have summer and winter forms, and white and colorful flowers, white and colorful seed coats, and green peas and yellow peas, and so on. But all grain legumes are very high in protein and starch and minerals. And so legumes are health promoting. For utilizing grain legumes, we can differentiate in low processing intensity and medium to high processing intensity. So low processing is flour for noodles or bread, and these dry goods and canned goods, and medium and high processing intensity is this separation into protein, starch, and fibers. And very high processing is to produce out of these protein isolates exudates for meat substitutes. Like here on the right side, these Midori palted or Midori stripes. These are meat substitutes produced out of protein isolates, and it's not clear until now what makes this process with the quality of it. Is legumes or grain legumes or pulses are described as healthy and rich in minerals and protein and starch, and here we have only an extract or an isolate of protein, and this is our open question. With project part, we did a sensoric test of a usual field pea. There is no difference between field pea for feed or for food. It's just the same. There's field pea is the same for feed and food, but there is a difference in taste. But no one until now worked out these differences in taste for field pea. And here we started with some usual varieties of field pea. This sensoric test showed strong variances between the different varieties. So the greatest distance we got for pea, typical, for sweet, and for the taste of butter, and also for ground and mineral taste. And here we can start to evaluate different varieties, or we can systematic start to evaluate different varieties for the food market. No one before looked at these. And also an initiative for Faberbean is a cooperation between producer organization, these Faber Trading, and a mill, the Roland Mill in Bremen. And they work together and they make meal out of bean and can sell these to these big producers of bread and other things for food. And also here with Bonicat, we work together with these initiatives. They produce snacks out of beans, roasted beans, and yeah, it's also an interesting way to utilize beans. Here we come to the conclusion. Growing grain legumes has positive effects on the farm and the environment. That's the reason why we are working on this demonstration network under the roof of this protein crop strategy. And we have diverse use of pea and bean for feed and food, but still most of the pea and bean is directly fed on the farm because the market prices are very low. And so we have to develop a market for grain legumes to get better prices for the farmer, to get a sustainable incentive for the farmer to produce grain legumes. And maybe food production can be a big driver for this development. Thank you for your attention, and I want to invite you to our webpage. It's in German, but you can put it to Google Translate and it's not a problem to translate to all languages you prefer. See you.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, for your presentation. You must be online because you answered already to Aila Vanhatalo's question. But now maybe you would like to comment it further. So Aila Vanhatalo from University of Helsinki asked, what is the most potential grain legume species to be used in livestock feeding in Germany?
Yes, hello?
Okay, thank you.
Ah, hi. Yes, I answered that it depends where your farm is located in Germany. If you can use if you can grow a bean, then you grow bean and feed it in your own farm feed, or you can prefer to grow pea, or you have the soil for lupin, then you grow lupins. Or in the south of Germany, we have these soybeans. The area of soybeans increase in the south of Germany. As I said in this presentation already, but for beans and peas, it's very easy to feed it or to put it in the feed ration. With soybeans, you need preparation. Yes, you have to heat soy due to this trypsin inhibitor and or to these antinutritive substances. So usually you roast or toast the soybeans, or you make extraction out of soybeans. So yes.
Okay, thank you. I just let you know that we can see some beautiful paintings on your on the laptop. So maybe your video is a little bit. You could move it a little bit. Okay, hi. It's nice to meet you. Okay. Also, Frederick Stoddard asks. Maybe you could, Fred. You
Yes,
could
sure.
also ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The on-farm use of legumes by, for instance, pig farmers is interesting. Do they have access? Can they use any form of, for instance, extrusion, which, as you know, reduces the activity of the anti-nutritional factors? It gelatinizes the starch, so it increases the available metabolizable energy. So it greatly increases the food value, or sorry, the feed value of either a bean or a pea.
Yes, the farms in our network do not process peas or beans. This is very expensive and high energy intensive, and for these farms it makes no sense to process it. So they just mill they mill these peas in their feed rations and just feed it. There are some feed compounders. They feed compound producers. They process beans with this extrusion and make it available to cow farmers. So they feed it to cows, and they have a value from it because the beans are more stable than in the rumen. So that's why they process it. But pig farmer actually not. Just so you have to process soybeans. That's the only legume that you have to process. So yeah.
Thank you for answering. I would like to ask one question. You thought that in organic farms it's possible to achieve much better total yields as mixtures with cereals. So, what are the reasons for that? Do you have any ideas?
Yes, in the mixture you have this. Usually you have these cereals and the grain legume, and the yields are volatile as well as same as you crop it in soil crops, but then you have then one crop can grow better than the other crop in this 1 year, and in the other year peas may be better than the cereals, and the next year's cereals better than the peas, but you get a stable yield in the total. But in the if you split it in peas and cereals, then you have also these volatile yields. So it's just if you look at the total, then you have these better yields. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we can continue our program. We are just in time, and next speaker will be Leopold Rittler from Donau, Soya, Austria. And Leopold's title is Soya from Europe, a climate-friendly opportunity for our agri-food system. Leopold, please, floor is yours.
Hello also from my side. My name is Leopold Rittler. I'm from Donau Soya and I'm head of research innovation there. It's a pleasure for me to be invited today to contribute with this video message to this online symposium. And I am looking forward to have a discussion with you in a couple of minutes. So at the beginning, let me ask you a question. What are the associations you have in mind immediately when you think about soybeans? Okay, so let me ask you then a second question. What do you think in which century and which country was the first book entirely about soybean published worldwide? Congratulations for those of you who have known this already. Professor Haberland, Professor Friedrich Haberland from Vienna, published in 1878 actually worldwide the first book entirely about soybean. In this book he published or summarized the results of his trials he conducted on more than 50 or 70 locations across Central Europe. This book was the first book written only about soybean. There would be much more to say about Professor Haberland and this early history about soybeans in Europe, but for me I would like to make the point here that soybean is actually not such an alien thing for Europe as many believe. So I hope that in the future, or maybe already after this presentation, you will associate with soybeans also Europe. So what I'm going to talk today, it is briefly about Donau Soya, and then more in detail about soybean production and use in Europe, and how soybeans from Europe can be a climate-friendly alternative for our agri-food system. What is Donau Soya? Donau Soya is an independent, non-profit and member-based organization. The head office is located in Vienna, but we also have offices in the Central Eastern European countries. We have more than 280 members, which are spread out in 25 countries. And these members are ranging from the whole value chain of soybeans, from research and science, plant breeding, farming, processing, food and feed production or distribution, retail, and the civil society. The goals of Donau Soya are to support the development of soybean production and use in Europe. And these goals are also recognized as important by 24 European governments who committed themselves or who recognizes in the Donau Soya and Europe Soya declarations the need to boost soybean production and also to rethink their own consumption system. A core feature of our organization are our products. Our main products are the Donau Soya and the Europe Soya quality standards. They stand for quality assured and origin controlled soybeans. They fulfill certain sustainability criteria and the origin in the Danube region, which is Central Eastern Europe, or from the whole European geographical scope. Certified soybeans according to the Donau Soya Europe Soya standards are used as a certified ingredient for food products, such as here you see the example from a Finnish tofu producer, or soybean. They can be used as a certified feed in, for example, egg products. And the use of this ingredient can be labeled on the packaging. Now I'm coming to the soybean production or soybean supply and demand situation in Europe. So why are we talking about soybeans so much actually? Soybeans, you must know, soybean is an excellent source of protein. It's protein rich and it's excellent source as protein for human consumption as well as animal consumption. Soybean is the #1 protein source in Europe, or here you see in the graph in the European Union. And a certain fact is also that much of it is imported actually. We are consuming about 40 million of tons of soybean meal equivalents. This is a sum out of soybeans and soybean meal, and about 90% of it is supplied by imports. The main exporting countries are Brazil, Argentina, or USA, for example. The consumption of soya in Europe is mainly in the area of feed. 80 to 85% is used as a normal commodity, as a component in compound feed. On top of it, we estimate 10 to 15% are used as a premium feed with the claim non-GM. And here the focus is mostly the location of the consumption is mainly in Central, Western, and also Northern Europe. We estimate that about 4 million tons of soy meal are used. And here the German market plays really a key and a leading role. I will come later in a minute why the non-GM sector is so essential also for the soybean producers in Europe. And we also estimate that about 1 to 3% approximately of the soya consumption in Europe is used as a food in forms of food products, tofu, soya drinks, and so forth. So you must understand that the non-GM premium is essential for soybean producers. The is paid out to soybean producers or for delivering certified non-GMO soybeans. In Europe, the European producers, they are allowed only to produce non-GM, but not all of them can achieve or can access this premium. Only when the soybeans can enter a certified value chain, then also the producers receive the benefits on the ground of the non-GM value chain. Here in this graph, you see the numbers for the non-GM premium on the level of soy meal, but this also corresponds roughly to soybeans in the end. So you see that the premium is fluctuating quite much over the years. And now we are currently having quite a strong peak. So the premium for non-GM soybean is climbing up more than 100 euros currently, which are on top of the commodity soybeans, according to the CBOT exchange, for example. If you're interested to obtain more information about the non-GMO market, about the soybean market, the trends and the demand and the supply side, then I recommend to you to look up the Donau Soya market report, which is published every month as a bulletin, and there are much more information included. So look up there if you are interested in more information about the market. Because now I'm going more into the cultivation side and explain you some aspects which are really relevant on the field level. So soybean cultivation in Europe, it's characterized that only non-GMO cultivars are allowed. And the main producers of these soybeans are located actually outside of the European Union. These are Ukraine and Russia as the main producing countries, followed by Serbia as a non-EU country. Inside the EU, Italy, Romania, and France are the leading producers. A positive news is that the soybean area increased in Europe, including Ukraine and Russia, during the last 8 years by 100%. So it has doubled. And now this year, approximately 4.2-ish million hectare are cultivated with soybeans. This corresponds, by the way, to approximately just 2% of the arable land in Europe. So soybean is increasing, but it's by far not a huge crop in Europe yet. Looking on the field level, as already said, only non-GMO cultivars allowed to be used in Europe. Currently, we have about 10 breeding programs in Europe, which are the basis to develop and innovate further the genetics to improve also the yields. On the crop management side, there are some specifics compared to the global average. Since we are non-GMO producing, we cannot use Roundup Ready, so glyphosate, during the vegetation period. So to combat or to manage weed in the field, we are using in Europe selective herbicides or mechanical weeding. Most of the production system, more than 90%, is conventional, so they are using 1 to 3 selective herbicide applications. Some are also integrating chemical and mechanical. A special thing about Europe is that we are in a lucky situation that we don't need very many fungicides or insecticides because the pest and the disease pressure is really low here. Looking on the harvest side, the yield levels are ranging between 2 and 5 tons, which means that soybeans grows quite well here in Europe. I admit 5 tons is really in exceptions and very favorable regions and only specific fields. But as you can see on the yield map on the right hand, a couple of countries are having yields which are close to 3, and Italy even belongs to the top 3 producer in terms of yield, right in the group with USA or Brazil. We estimate that about 10% of the European Union soybean area is covered with organic soybeans. Italy, France, and Austria are the leading producers in this regard. The next minutes I'm spending on how soya from Europe can be seen also as a climate-friendly alternative. You all know that agriculture and land use, forestry, the whole sector is the whole sector of producing food is essential, or is a big player, actually a big contributor to the global greenhouse gas emissions. The IPCC reports that about 20, 25, 24% are caused by this sector. Animal production is a big player or a big contributor within this sector. And I admit that the perfect use actually for soybeans from Europe would be to consume them directly. So not feeding them to the animals, because in terms of resource efficiency, it's more efficient to far more efficient to use the soybeans in form as a food soya product. So there is no doubt about it, and I believe that such plant-based proteins will have a bigger share in our future diet. However, this is not the core part of my presentation. In the next minutes, I'm focusing how soybeans from Europe can be a climate-friendly alternative as a feed. So here you just again a key number for this area. So in a conventional pig production system, the feed provision is causing about up to 2% or something like that of the CO2 emissions on the level of the farm. So this means that the feed, or looking at the feed, is very important, and soybean, as it's mixed commonly in a compound feed for pigs or poultry, it becomes a very essential role in the carbon footprint calculations, and this is what will become clear to you in the next minutes. This year in our organization, we have calculated carbon footprint, or we have assessed the carbon footprint of soybeans from our farms. So we have collected and surveyed farms, and we have questioned them in regard to soybean specific input use and basic infrastructure, fertilizer use, yields, and so forth and so forth. And here I'm showing you the results of a supply chain for a specific oil mill, which is using soybeans from Serbia, Romania, and Croatia. So we have surveyed farms in these countries, and now you're seeing the results of the carbon footprint, so the CO2 emissions per kilogram of soybeans of an average soybean in this supply chain. So 0.31 kilogram CO2 emissions per kilogram of soybeans are emitted by an average soybean in this supply chain. On the right hand, you see the graph with the different inputs, fertilizer, diesel consumption, laughing gas emissions from the soil. Those are summing up to those emissions are summing up to a value of 0.31. This value is, if you compare it to a value in Brazil with 0.56, appears to be quite good. If you compare it with a larger number of numbers from different countries, you will realize, okay, the variance is quite big between the countries. And if you look in between the different databases, you find different numbers for each country. So the difference between 0.31 and 0.56 appears to be big, but it's not a really relevant or important difference. The important message for you is that the emissions are roughly on the same level. The cultivation emissions from the cultivation are approximately on the same level here. If you only exclude land use change, land use change will have a big factor in the carbon footprint emissions. Land use change is the conversion from forest land, grassland, or perennial cropland into cropland, into the specific cropland of soybeans. We did this according to the methodology proposed in the PAS 2050 methodology, and this is the method which is used in the specific feed business sector. And here you see the result. If you include the land use change, the emissions due to land use change in the European countries, because of the conversion from perennial cropland to soybeans, the emissions are per 1 kilogram of soybeans about 0.71 kilogram of CO2 emissions per kilogram of soybeans for this specific supply chain to the oil mill. Comparing on farm level with Brazil, including land use change according to this database, the value is significantly, about 7 times higher. It's about 5.20. This is due to the factor land use change. And here, this is for business insiders quite common knowledge already, that the land use change factor has the essential and the crucial factor in these carbon footprint assessments. So by replacing soybeans, the default soybeans from overseas, which carry a land use change, with soybeans from Europe, a substantial reduction potential can be achieved. This is also visible and translates into reduction potentials on the level of animal production. Here you see a calculation we did last year with the University from Vienna, and we calculated how much CO2 is the Austrian egg production currently reducing or avoiding by using Donau Soya certified soybeans. It's about a third of the emissions compared to a standard default feed ratio, which is we call it the Western European mix. 36% CO2 emissions can be avoided. You might, and these savings or these reduction potentials are already used by companies who want to have a claim in their commercial activities that they are using climate-friendly feed. So using soybeans or local protein sources can be an opportunity for creating value. So you see here two recent examples. Last year, the Feed Navigator posted the story about Norwegian salmon farmers who are placing Brazilian soybeans. And this year, this is a photo from a press conference with the German retailer Edeka in Germany, who replaced in their premium pick program the overseas soybeans with Donau Soya soybeans, and by that they are reducing 40% of the CO2 emissions. So using climate-friendly feed can be an option for businesses to create additional value for their company. I'm coming now to the conclusions of my presentation. So as you have seen in beginning, the soybeans are growing quite well in Europe. The yields are quite moderate, and in certain regions even on a globally competing level. The outlook for soybean production in Europe is also positive. I have not mentioned in detail, but it's now an outlook. It is the political framework conditions are positive and favorable, and the current discussions about CO2 tax or also climate protection are favoring the soybean production indirectly. As we have seen in the studies I have shown to you, soybean has a huge impact on the carbon footprint of food products, and this becomes very significant if land use change emissions are also considered. And businesses, as we've seen in the last two examples, can also use this as a kind of a CSR measure. They can use climate-friendly feed as a mean to also create additional value. So they can significantly improve the carbon footprint of their product by using deforestation-free, so European soybeans, for example, in their feed or in their food products. And there's a but. We have talked now much about the carbon footprint, or I've presented you some insights on this, but in fact, it is many other sustainability criteria needs to be considered in this discussion as well. So it's not only about CO2 emissions, it should be also about ecology of production, the animal welfare, but also the transparency in the traceability inside the value chain. Those aspects I could not approach in our presentation today, but I'm just mentioning that these are also very important aspects for the decision making in this sector. Last but not least, here a teaser for more information about soybeans in Europe. This is a reference to a project where I'm involved currently. It's the project Legumes Translated. Visit our website or us on Facebook, Legumes Translated. There you find more of the current information on soybean production, information for practitioners, guides, videos. Please have a look and visit us. Thank you very much for your attention. Now I'm looking forward to your questions, and yeah, best greetings from my home office from Vienna.
Thank you, Leopold, for your interesting presentation. Yes, we do have 5 minutes time for questions, and looking at chat, there are no questions presented. Fred, do you have any questions in your mind?
Why me, I ask, why me? Yeah, not so much a question as a comment that I agree that Europe has a lot of potential to grow soy, and it's good to have these numbers in front of us. and demonstrations of the potential, especially of Central Europe, to grow soy. We should remember, though, that soy is not suitable for all climates, and not all climates are suitable for soy. It's part of a broader package. I emphasized the cool season legumes in my talk, bean, faba bean and pea, and Ulrich also included lupins in his, because we need all the options available if we want to have, especially on-farm use. Let's see if that.
Yes.
Any further comments from the audience.
Okay, no comments. Would you like to comment that insight, Leopold?
I absolutely agree to Frederick. What he's saying about what he's commenting that legume, that each region kind of needs its own legume. It's not one fits all, obviously. So this is absolutely. I absolutely share his comment as well.
Yeah. You told. I was wondering that what is the role of GMO-free soya in the future? How competent is European GMO free soya in the global market? So what is your idea on that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. The GMO sector is currently, the GMO-free sector is a very dynamic sector, actually. Currently, it grows very much. The demand side in Europe is growing very much. It is outside of the European Union, the demand for soybeans in a non-GMO quality is also present. But less as a feed, but in a way of a food. The food and the food grade non-GMO quality is also very much appreciated in Asia, for example. And so this is from this demand side. This is continuing, and the European production is also competitive in this regard in the future, as long as the non-GMO premium can be accessed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now there are some questions to you. One question is that Nicholas Cartoon asks: is the most of the soy produced in Eastern Europe used in the producing countries or exported to Western Europe?
So it is a part of it is consumed locally, and a big part is also exported to the Central Western Europe. So they are already connected to the Central European market, and but yeah, this is some aspect which can be also improved. Actually, this is now a small reference to the logistics. The Danube, for example, is a very important connecting river of Central and Eastern European Union or Europe, and their logistical improvements are very important and would provide us additional potentials to increase the connection of Eastern and Central Europe in terms of agriculture production. In the local consumption of soybeans in Eastern Europe, in regard to the non-GMO, is also could be better developed. Well, the market uptake or the market premiums for non-GMO quality in Eastern Europe, it's not so significant, I must say. The premiums are accessible for producers in Eastern Europe when they manage to export and access value chains in Central Europe. This is, from their perspective, important.
Okay, thank you. There are still some very interesting questions in the chat box. So I ask you to answer to those questions to chat box, because we have to continue our program. And next we shall have a break, a 5 minutes break. And the program will be continued 10:45. So please come back after 5 minutes. See you. Program, and the next speaker will be Karen Hamann from Institute for Food Studies and Agroindustrial Development, Denmark. And Karen's title is The Diversity of Business Cases and Opportunities for Grain Legumes in Food. Okay, let's start Karen's presentation.
Good morning. My name is Karen Hamann. I come from the Institute for Food Studies and Agroindustrial Development in Denmark, and I've been invited to give you a presentation about some of our results from the TRUE project. The TRUE project is about sustainable pathways for having more legumes in the food and agri-food systems of the European Union. And we try to achieve this by doing different experiments. We call them case studies. We involve a lot of stakeholders, and we have a strong scientific involvement in the project. Our overall approach is to stimulate market uptake of legumes by addressing policymakers, businesses, farmers, and academia. So we try to have a very broad approach, and we work with legumes which are relevant for food as well as for feed. The project has 24 partners from 11 countries, and we also have a partner from Kenya. We have divided our partnerships into 3 clusters, one from the Atlantic region, one from the Mediterranean region, because of climatic conditions, different cultivation opportunities, and different consumer patterns. The project is coordinated by the James Hutton Institute in Scotland, and it should run also for most of next year. I've been invited to give you a presentation about our results related to markets and consumers, and I'm the leader of the markets and supply chain work package in TRUE. If we look at the different consumption patterns we see in Europe, we see very wide differences between the countries. And these differences relate to the type of pulse that people eat, but also how these pulses are processed. If we take the Nordic region and the Baltic Sea region, there we have a very strong preference for frozen pulses and canned pulses. In Europe, the intake of dried pulses is far larger, which you see here represented from Spain, Italy, and Greece. So this means that when we look at the market opportunities for pulses, we need to see this in a very diverse approach, as consumers are very, very different. There is a very strong cultural element also to what types of pulses and legumes you would like to eat. But with this big diversity also comes lots of opportunities for producing many different types of products made with legumes and pulses. And these pictures just shows you some of the first ideas when we talk about legume-based foods. On the top, we have a product like the vegetarian burgers made from the Swedish company Anama. Below, we have a very traditional product. In this case, it's an American product, but it's canned beans. Then we have the fresh peas, and we have a very innovative pea drink. It's actually also American. But the point is to say, when we look at the diversity of pea pulse products in the market, we see fresh, frozen, canned products for drinks processed in many different ways into many different products. And just to take this one step further, we also see new opportunities in very, very innovative products, which in this case on the top, we have lentil yogurt developed by an Israeli company. And below we have a product developed in the UK, which is called Oggs, which is an egg substitute, which is suitable for vegan consumers. It's made from the aquafaba. So the Oggs represent a new way of using a byproduct otherwise being wasted. Therefore, we also need to look a bit about what are actually the trends which favor market development. And one of the biggest trends we see in the European market today is a very strong motivation among consumers to reduce the meat and dairy consumption. This, of course, leads to a strong demand for plant-based products, including pulse-based products. There also seems to be a very big trend towards having more vegetarian diets. Vegetarian food seems to become more appealing to mainstream consumers, and you see examples of consumers deliberately choosing 1 or 2 meat-free days per week. A big discussion is also going on about the vegan market. And vegan people, they do not eat any livestock or animal-based products. But the vegan market seems to gain more foothold in the mainstream market, yet still being very, very small. The vegan market is also very innovative, and many new pulse-based products have been developed with a vegan claim. Overall, as we know for the conventional food market, consumers are very interested in healthy food, but also easy to cook products. So this means there is a growing demand for plant-based convenience products, how to make cooking easy for consumers. Finally, a big trend which we should not neglect is that consumers are very curious and they are interested in new types of foods and new ingredients. There was a survey a few years ago carried out among Nordic countries, and here we have the results of this survey. The point is to say, if you look at the consumers in Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, and compare these consumers, we see, as I said before, a very strong trend for having meat-free days. And the motivation differs. In Denmark, a strong motivation is economy, so consumers can save money by switching to a plant-based diet. Whereas a big motivation for consumers in Sweden and Finland was to save climate impact. So that is a reason linked to improving the environment. So the point is to say that we can actually document a strong interest in among consumers for paying attention to the environment. A Danish company called Naturlig Foods has picked up on this interest in environment and uses this actively in its marketing. Naturlig Foods produce plant-based products, and they actually say here, by communicating in a very easy way with pictures, that the good way forward is where you have the green marking from plants to plate, whereas the old way is the red cross. That's the no-go in the future. So it can be communicated to consumers in very simple ways. Let's have a look at the market for meat alternatives, because this is definitely a high growth in Europe, but also in the US, and Asia is picking up on this trend as well. The meat alternative market is not a new market, as we have known soy-based products in the market for many years and targeted at the vegetarian market segment. But what really takes off now are meat alternatives made with pea protein or even fava bean protein. This is big news, and this has really fueled the demand globally for false protein ingredients. Another big driver in this market is, as I mentioned before, consumers' desire for convenience products. Consumers want convenient products, not the ingredients. So this makes it very good business to market burgers or schnitzels or sausages, similar products, this time made with false protein. To give you an example of such companies, I mentioned before the Danish company Naturlig Foods, which produce, let's call it minced meat with false protein, using both proteins from peas and beans and chickpeas, and also soy proteins. And these products are marketed in Danish supermarkets, but also in the UK, and the company is enjoying a big export success also to other markets. Another company operating in this market segment is Nestlé's brand Garden Gourmet. Here you also see a range of products where you can have alternatives for poultry meat, and you can have filled schnitzels. And what make these companies, both Naturlig Foods and Nestlé's brand, successful are that they are built on scalable supply chains. So this is something which could really be scaled up and produced in big volumes and for export market and really supplying the supermarket sectors. Another strong element which fuels the growth for these companies are excellent and strong marketing efforts. I would now like to share with you just a few examples of other business cases. There was a baker in Denmark, an artisan baker, and he wanted to make gluten-free brownies. And he found out that he could actually use fava bean flour for this product. And he developed such a successful recipe that he could actually start selling these brownies, both in his shop, but also via internet sales. This just demonstrates that also artisan people could actually take on new recipes and start using pulses in new ways. There is a company called Break Foods from the UK, and they have a philosophy of using locally produced peas to make snacks. And as we're talking about sweet goods, they also have a snack which is chocolate coated peas made with British peas and for sales in the UK market. So this just illustrates that a lot of innovation goes into these products, also from small companies or from startups. We have come across a company called Cultivation, located in the Peloponnese Valley near Athens in Greece. And they have developed a product which is a very special variety of beans. It's called the vanilla beans, and it's only grown in this valley. This product has the PDO and PGI certifications of the EU, underlining its very, very local significance. But these beans are actually being sold again via internet sales, via farm shops, and for local supermarkets as a high value product. And the success of this business case is that it's based on local collaboration. It's the local collaboration with an approach to seed testing, cultivation, processing, and marketing that ties this supply chain together and actually provides the opportunity to market dried beans with a high value label via the internet. We visited, as part of our activities in the True project, a German company called Leise. It's based in Baden-Württemberg, and it's a cooperative producing organic lentils. And the good story of this business case is that the entrepreneur found the right heritage variety, which actually originated in Baden-Württemberg in a gene bank in Russia, brought the variety back to Baden-Württemberg and started to grow the green lentils. He had more farmers to join his endeavor, and today there are a network of 20 farmers growing these green lentils for sale in the local area and to restaurants. The product is sold in his lovely farm shop and also in local supermarkets. And the success of this business case is based on his abilities to organize the production and organizing the scaling up, plus the uniqueness of the variety. So both the case from Germany and Greece illustrates that variety can mean a big issue if you want to develop a supply chain or a business case for dried pulses. I would not do without mentioning a very big success, which is the frozen peas industry. Here with the example from the UK, because the UK is the largest producer and consumer of frozen peas in Europe, with a production of nearly 150,000 tons of peas. The success factors for having this is scale and scalability. It's a traditional product, but with a very high demand across the EU and particularly in the UK. So even if we talk successful business cases, we must not overlook the very large companies or the very large types of production. In this case, frozen peas, but it could also be canned beans. I would also like to show you an example from the convenience industry. This is the Danish factory of Donau. They produce spring rolls. And we visited this factory And we enjoyed the whole tour, and we started to see the beans because they use mung beans, sprout these beans, and actually use them as an ingredient in the spring rolls. So also when you look at the convenience sector, not only meat alternatives, but convenience food, you also find big opportunities for including pulses into the final products. Now I would like to say a few words about the restaurant sector, food service and restaurants, because you also find some very interesting business cases in this segment. Plus, food service and restaurants plays a very, very strong role for educating consumers and providing meals to vulnerable groups like children or people in hospitals or senior citizens. So across the EU, the food service provides maybe 25% of the food consumed. So it's a very big market for using legumes and pulses in food. So I'll just give you a few examples. As I mentioned before, the vegan and vegetarian diets are taking off, and consumers are becoming more concerned with being a flexitarian, so you avoid meat in a few days of a week. And some restaurant chains have actually picked up on this, and vegan restaurant chains have started to appear. What I show you in the picture is a menu from a vegan restaurant. So it already looks very advanced also for chained restaurants. You could also see a trend in the British restaurant scene where restaurants listed in the top 100 are also offering meat-free dining. So the point is to say also the restaurant market has a big demand for meat-free products, and this calls for pulses in different varieties. We could also turn our eyes to Scandinavia, and here are a few examples from Sweden. Because back in 2017, McDonald's in Sweden launched the veggie burger, a very at the forefront of things to take off, and introduced this in Stockholm and Helsinki. The Swedish restaurant chain Max Hamburgers followed closely. They have 100 restaurants in Sweden and introduced 4 green burgers. And they have extended their assortment of plant-based burgers since then. So even a traditional meat market like the burger sector calls for plant-based alternatives. So to conclude, we must be aware that the global market for plant-based products is increasing, and this calls for different types of pulses, different degrees of processing, different ways to use pulses, both fresh, processed, and dried, and otherwise. There are lots of new products coming out into the market made with pulses, where pulses play a central part form the central part of the product, or where pulses are only a marginal share of the ingredients. Yet there is a very, very strong attention from the food industry and the drinking industry on how to use pulses. Consumers are understanding the plant-based diets, and consumers now see plant-based products as part of the mainstream assortment in the supermarkets. So that you could be fair to say that plant-based products are now expected by the consumers. So this also means that the market will develop into a more competitive scene where innovation will play an even bigger role than we see today. So my final words would be that innovation and supply chain organizations are key factors for success if you want to make food or drink products with pulses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Karen, for your presentation. Now I would like to check whether you are online and you are capable to answer to our questions.
Yes, good morning. This is Karen. I'm online.
Okay.
I'm trying to start my video. I'm
yes. Here. Okay. Please, little bit move your video. Okay. Now it's much better. Looking at the chat, there is only one question at the moment. Jukka Kajan is wondering if the study behind consumer trends in the Nordic countries 2018 is publicly available. Is it published?
It is published. It's not our work. It is something we have identified when we were carrying out research for the True reports. I think actually it was prepared by a Swedish market research company. And I don't remember the name of the company, but it's prepared in Sweden.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
So yes, it is public. You can download the results, but I don't remember the name of the company. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. I would like to ask one question. I must say that I'm also flexitarian and nowadays eating quite much pulses and mainly peas and beans, not and also soya in my daily lunches and in eating. We do have nowadays much wider availability of meat alternatives also in Finnish supermarkets. But I'm quite often wondering that those are much more processed than meat. And what do you think? Do other consumers also wonder that processing issue? Do you have made any studies on that topic?
We can see from the market research which has been carried out as part of the True project. I visited a lot of different supermarkets in Hungary and Denmark and the Netherlands and Belgium and the UK, also in Finland actually, and in Sweden. And when we look at the assortment of the meat alternatives, you're absolutely right. They're highly processed products made with several different ingredients. And we see also the pulse ingredients used for these products. They span across soy proteins to pea proteins. We also see wheat protein, which is not a pulse, but anyway, it's also used. And the issue is, if you ask consumers what are driving their purchasing motivation, then it's a matter of climate, it's a matter of avoiding meat, just generally avoiding meat or cutting down on meat, and finding an alternative. And here they turn their attention to the plant-based alternatives. The consumers are not really aware of the ingredients. Some are definitely looking for soy, maybe because of allergens, looking to avoid soy, but consumers are not looking. We have not identified documentation for that, at least. So we can state that consumers are not looking exactly for meat alternatives made with, for instance, pea protein or bean protein. They're looking for meat alternatives. Having said that, that is how the consumers they identify these products. They see them as meat alternatives. I don't think consumers go into details looking into these products as highly processed or complex products, which they actually are, because you use different types of ingredients. You use the ingredients actively to make the plant-based products taste like beef or chicken. You make the ingredients, the combination of ingredients to make the products bleed or change the flavors when you fry them and so on. So there is a lot of science behind making these products, and I'm not sure the consumers are actually aware of that. So therefore, the whole discussion about the complexity of plant-based products, I don't think it has taken on in the consumer market yet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a very informative answer. So I will give floor to Fred. You may have some comments or questions. Please, Fred.
Yes, a couple of things, but I'll try to be brief. The cultural context of the meat alternatives and the dairy alternatives and so on, the novel foods is interesting. When I travel around, I see quite different things in supermarkets, and I wish that some of them would become more widespread. In Australia, at the beginning of the year, I saw lots of hummus type foods, each made from a different legume with different flavoring, and hardly any meat alternatives. Here we have the meat alternatives. You pointed out the yogurt alternative in Israel. So I think that our different cultures give us opportunities to develop things, but then we need some alternative, some ways of exchanging these ideas, benefiting from each other's cultural contexts.
You are absolutely right, and I can only agree with you. And what you're pointing at is exactly what we also see in the research we have carried out. And I would also like to add to the examples you brought forward, Asia, because Asia is also very interested in the plant-based market, and particularly plant-based drinks seem to take off in Asia. We see marginally traces of plant-based the meat alternatives, which we see very slowly developing in countries like Singapore. But I fully agree with you. There is a very strong cultural aspect to this, and finding ways on how to exchange about the culture, the food culture, processing technologies, and so would be very relevant. And I would be interested in learning more and if possible, even participate in projects about this, because that could be the next step forward. That is the cultural aspects.
Okay, then I have time to present one more question. Nicholas Carton asked, are you aware of initiatives in Northern or Central Europe to increase the consumer motivation to cook dry pulses from scratch? So,
must check I got that question right. Is the question about cooking pulses from scratch?
Cooking, yeah. Is there any promotion to motivate people to increase consumption of dry pulses or cook dry pulses?
Yes, we know from the consumer research we did in the True project that dry pulses is particularly in Eastern Europe and in South Europe considered parts of the stable foods of the diet. So it's something which is consumed in quite high amounts. But it's also a traditional food which links with family cooking and home cooking and taking time to cook. And we have a polarization in front of us, because the younger generations are not in favor of spending lots of time to cook, whereas adults and senior citizens are much more familiar with using dry pulses. So the point is to say, if we want the younger generations to take on more dried pulses, we need to come up with a solution which maybe cuts down on the cooking time, which makes it more accessible to younger people to use dry pulses. And I think that is a tricky issue which needs to be considered, because promoting dried pulses, that can be done in many contexts, like organic product or local products, or just in general, or just by lower prices in supermarkets, this week's special offer. And that is definitely being done. But to also capture the next generation of consumers for dried pulses, I think that is the issue.
Okay, thanks for excellent answer and your presentation. And now I think that it's time to continue our program, and we shall listen Anne-Maria Pajari from University of Helsinki, and Anne-Maria will tell us about the role of legumes in the planetary health diet.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Anne-Maria Pajari. I come from the Department of Food and Nutrition, University of Helsinki, and I will talk to you today about the role of legumes in the planetary health diet. The content of my talk today is, we first start, what is the planetary health diet and where does it come from? Then go on to the role of legumes in the planetary health diet, and lastly look at the Finnish situation with legume consumption and what should we do about it. First, about planetary health diet. It is a reference diet for promoting health through diets from sustainable food production. The concept was published last year in Lancet, and the work has been carried out by the Eat Lancet Commission that consists of 37 scientists with very multidisciplinary background and coming from 16 different countries. The work was funded by the Wellcome Trust and EAT, so by non-profitable trust. First, a little bit about the background for the planetary health diet. We are facing huge nutritional related problems globally today. First of all, there is lack of food that affects 820 million people. So either they are not having enough food or the food quality is quite poor and not sufficient for growth and maintaining health. Moreover, world's population is growing at the moment, and it's estimated that there will be 10 billion people by year 2050. That's a huge amount of population that needs to be given enough food. On the other hand, we have an altogether other kind of a problem, which is overnutrition and leading to obesity epidemic. And obesity is related to increased risk for many chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. So we have two basic big problems, undernutrition and overnutrition. And sometimes they are even placed at the same time in some developing countries. The other big issue is that our food production pushes the planetary boundaries. So we are nearly used all of our planetary resources, and moreover, producing food contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And this has been tried to deal with, for example, by Paris Agreement, aiming to reduce the increase of global temperature, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals aim to deal with hunger and other health issues, for example, accessibility to fresh water and sanitation to all. So if we really want to do something with the situation and want to follow Paris Agreement and try to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to do something with our food production and with our diet. So that is the idea behind planetary health diet. It tries to combine the health of the planet and its inhabitants by suggesting a universal healthy reference diet. The diet is based on current scientific evidence on food and dietary patterns and how they are associated to health outcomes. And it aims to ensure two things. First of all, that there would be enough food for the growing population of the planet, and also at the same time to reduce the burden of chronic diseases. And it also aims to combine this to mitigate climate changes and promote the transition towards more sustainable food production. A brief overview of planetary health diet. It suggests that we really should move more towards plant-based food consumption, particularly doubling the consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts. And at the same time, we should reduce at least 50% of the consumption of red meat and added sugars, and also starchy vegetables that are usually poor with micronutrients and vitamins. So the basic suggestions are that we should limit the intake of red meat that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, and starchy vegetables. We could have some animal source foods in our diet, for example, eggs, poultry, dairy foods. And the emphasized foods are fish, vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. How does planetary health diet look like in our plate? On your right-hand side, you'll see the plate. So basically, a half of the plate is covered with vegetable foods. The other half has different components. So starting from the upper right corner, there are whole grains. Then there comes some animal protein sources, dairy foods, and meat. And near, actually, even a bigger slice is reserved for plant source food, so plant protein source food, and the fat should preferably be of plant oils. Added sugar should only have like a very small slice of the plate. So basically, this is a flexitarian diet, even though it's largely plant-based, but it can include modest amounts of fish, meat, and dairy products. It doesn't actually give like a absolute grams per day for the foods, but gives ranges for let's say a good consumption for each food group. So and it acknowledges actually that use of animal source foods needs to be considered, taking into account local and regional realities. So there are regions in the earth that are not very suitable for growing plants, but can be used for animal husbandry, and in those situations, we should really carefully consider how much animal source foods can be on the plate. So perhaps more than in other areas that are more suitable for growing different plants and grains. So as I said, the reference diet is composed of ranges for amounts of different food groups, and these are calculated so that they would represent or give enough energy for an average daily energy intake of 2,500 kilocalories. And the reference values, so there actually are reference values which you can see in the table on your right-hand side and marked with orange or red. And starting from the upper corner, there are whole grains, rice, wheat, corn, and other, 232 grams per day. Then there are tubers, starchy vegetables, such as potatoes and cassava, 50 grams, and the range is from 0 to 100. Vegetables, meaning all vegetables, on average 300 grams, but the range is from 200 grams to 600 grams. Fruits, on average 200 grams, but the range is from 100 grams to 300 grams. Dairy foods, on average 250 grams, but here we can start with 0 and up till 500 grams per day. So there is quite a large range there. Protein sources, beef, lamb, pork, on average only 14 grams per day, which is not much, but there is a suggested range from 0 to 28 grams per day. Chicken and other poultry, 29 grams, range from 0 to 58 grams. Eggs, 13 grams, from 0 to 25 grams. Fish, 28 grams. And once again, the range is from 0 to 100 grams. And legumes, 75 grams. And the range is from 0 to 100 grams, and nuts about 50 grams, range from 0 to 75 grams. Then there are fat sources, added fats, so which should preferably be unsaturated oil, saturated, and the lesser amount of saturated oils and added sugars. So that is giving like the range. So many types of diet actually can be composed with these reference values. So giving a flexibility for adapting to different food cultures and practices. Then let's look at more closely the legumes in planetary health diet and the Finnish situation. So as you noticed, there was the suggested amount of legumes per day is 75 grams. And that is actually quite a lot. And it's there are sort of the more detailed reference values for different legumes. So that 50 grams of that 75 grams of a day can be composed of beans, lentils, and peas, and that is by dry weight. So it's actually quite a lot, and 25 grams per day of soybeans. And if we think what are the considerations behind this legume recommendation, so basically legumes are a very good source of dietary protein. So they are there to partly replace the more abundant consumption of animal protein sources we have in our Western diets today. They are also good sources of dietary fiber, good sources of folate, contain varying amounts of carotenoids and vitamin K, and overall are quite relatively low in energy, and the fat composition is quite favorable. So containing unsaturated fatty acids, which is good for heart health. So these are the like the considerations behind and leading to health benefits, because based on current scientific evidence, it seems that legumes, for example, reduce LDL cholesterol and blood pressure. That has observed in clinical trials, and these so both cholesterol and blood pressure are risk factors for cardiovascular diseases. So there is this option of decreasing risk of cardiovascular diseases. Legumes are, as a source of dietary fiber and phytoestrogens, they can affect the risk of cancer, particularly to reduce the risk of colorectal and breast cancer. There are also some evidence that legumes may attenuate postprandial glucose and insulin responses and contribute to satiety. And this way, they may have benefit for dealing with type 2 diabetes and help maintain a healthy weight. So obviously, legumes, increasing legume consumption have health benefits and is a good protein source in our diet. So what is the Finnish situation at the moment? So we know, based on Finravinto 2017 survey, that the protein intake in Finland currently in men is around 98 grams per day, consisting of 18 energy percent. And in women, that is 73 grams per day, which is equals to 17.5 energy percent. All this protein intake roughly 2/3 comes from animal-derived protein sources, so mostly meat and milk, and only 1/3 comes from plant-derived protein sources. And there, the grain products are like the main source, and nearly nothing else. In Finland, consumption of legumes is next to nothing, I would say. It's really nearly insignificant, around 10 grams per day. And if we think it as a protein source, it contributes 2 to 3 energy %. So we really have a lot of space to increase our legume consumption in Finland. So if we think about our current dietary habits, 1/3 of Finnish women and 2/3 of Finnish men consume red meat more than is recommended in our current dietary guidelines. And the guidelines says that we should consume no more than 500 grams of red meat per week. We can afford to reduce red meat consumption, at least to the level recommended in our dietary guidelines. And that is actually more than double of the upper limit suggested in the planetary health diet, which is around 200 grams per week. So we have a long distance to that 200 grams per week. And I'm not quite sure whether that is something we should, as large, to try to achieve. But that because of lack of time, I won't go into details. But I really think that we should first set our target to the red meat consumption recommended in our dietary guidelines. And at the same time, when we reduce red meat consumption, it would be quite natural to increase legume consumption, and particularly by using, I've put quotation marks, Finnish legumes. So the legume species we can cultivate in Finland that are pea, faba bean, and lupine, and we could really increase the consumption of legumes, and that would benefit our health and probably also help to move towards more sustainable food production. So in summary, the planetary health diet is a reference diet aiming at promoting human health as well as more sustainable food system. Legumes have an important role in the planetary health diet as a plant protein source. And whether or not we consider planetary health diet feasible to Finnish situation, I think we should really aim to increase our legume consumption, and it would benefit our health and help moving towards a more sustainable food system. So I thank you for your attention, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Anna-Maria, for your excellent presentation. Some numbers were not very clear for me in your presentation, and you had lots of numbers. So I hope that these presentations are available later after this webinar, and I understood that those are. There's one question in chat. Any info about the role of oil seeds and the use of protein meal cake after the vegetable oil pressing? What kind of food products could be produced from oilseed proteins?
That is a very interesting question, and I think there is quite a lot of possibilities there. I'm not sure if you refer to pressed rapeseed or other hemp seed and so on. some problem there are that they probably need to go to EFSA review because they haven't been used as part of human diet as EFSA expects them. So that might be a limit to their consumption, or at least like slow down their use. But basically, yeah, I think some of those have very good protein content, even not bad amino acid content. So I think certainly using breast oil seeds would be quite interesting option for human food and as a plant protein source.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to ask you, do you have any idea what makes it so difficult for Finns to eat legumes? Is it all about habits, or?
I think it's partly habits. So the most used legume dish in Finland is pea soup.
Yes, and every Thursday.
Every Thursday, yes. So I think we've eaten it since Middle Ages. But I think we used to use more, let's say, faba bean back 100 years ago, and it's just disappeared from our plates for a while. Yes, I think we should have quite a, I would say, like a big effort to reintroduce some legume dishes to our population, and I think it can be done if we are motivated enough. Yeah, there is, of course, so it's well known that some legumes cause gut discomfort for some sensitive persons. So that is probably one thing suppressing legume use. We made a clinical intervention where we observed that perhaps around 1/5 to 20 to 30% suffered for some gut symptoms when they eat legume products. So definitely that might be a problem. And also it's been blamed that legumes have this sort of a bean like taste, and that is not pleasant for everyone. So I guess there are many reasons what we are used to eat, and also these gut problems might be something to work on.
Okay, thank you. Fred, would you like to comment or ask something?
I'd like to comment about flavor, because this is relevant to, well, all of our talks today. That the product needs to have a suitable flavor for people to come back and eat it again. And for instance, some of the highly processed steps necessary, or the steps necessary in making protein isolates and possibly protein concentrates or other wet foods out of legumes produce they either produce flavors that are undesirable, or they just have flavors that aren't interesting. Similarly, our oilseed proteins have dull or bad flavors. There's been a great deal of progress, I heard a couple of weeks ago, in Canada, making foods out of rapeseed protein. And there's this overwhelming problem that the texture is fine, but we have to do something about the flavor. And this is something where there's active research in ours and other universities and other places, what we can do about it. And this is it's a hurdle that we will I think get over with time, but it is a hurdle that we have to recognize and approach from different aspects and perhaps again different background food cultures.
Okay, thank you, Fred. I would like to pick up one question presented by Aila Vanhatalo. It's about legume phytoestrogens. Any harmful health effects or positive health effects?
Yes, they've been studied quite a lot with regard to soy, and there are, so basically the idea behind phytoestrogens is that they act like weak estrogen, have a weak estrogen activity in the body, and that is related to their ability to prevent breast cancer, for example. I think there's not like a very strong consensus of whether the effect is or how strong it is. There are some in a way quite strong evidence that from Chinese population that if women eat soy products from during their whole life, it really prevents against post-menopausal breast cancer. So so basically, it's assumed that phytoestrogens are having favorable effects, but it's known quite a long time that they might be if we think about pre-menopausal women, they might have or mess up a little bit with what's that? So they might have some difficulties getting pregnant and that sort of things, but they are more like case reports, and I don't think there is much evidence that there would be like a big adverse effects in humans, at least. When given to animals in high doses, certainly there are some difficulties, for example, to getting puppies and so on, in rats at least.
Okay, thank you, Anna-Maria. I would like to still pick up one question. Riitta Savikko is wondering how we could promote legumes as part of our regular or usual diet instead of creating identity questions or conflicts between different diets. Maybe she's referring to vegan diet or something like this. How could all the people select legumes?
That is a tough question. I would be happy if I know what to do. So I guess it is. I think these catering services and these we have these school meals and so on. I think that is quite a strong option. Just to try to educate the children and yes, of course, try to. I'm not sure what we should do to promote legumes, but I guess we should try to make it as a part of our let's say mixed diet, so that it's not like it shouldn't be like labeled as only vegan and so on. I think it should, once we get rid of like all these sort of labels and have like how I would say we should have more like pea soup sort of dishes. So pea soup can be made in many ways, so that it fixes to mixed diet and fixes to vegan diets and so on. So I think we should have more pea soup like dishes.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne-Maria. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for closing remarks, and I will start my video and try to share a couple of slides I have prepared for this final speech. I hope that you all can see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My mic is also unmuted. Thank you. I would like to say some words after these excellent presentations. This picture is taken by me. I visited one organic farm in Finland, and it's present in there red clover. It's very commonly farmed in Finland for as fodder legume. And as you probably all know, that legumes are mandatory in organic crop rotation, also in Finland. I would like to sum up key messages from field to fork. Fred started and told us in his opening speech that legumes actually have been part of agriculture for 10,000 years, and they are offering multiple benefits: good for soil, good for pollinators, crop rotation, and healthy food and feed. As many others also told about the health aspects of legumes. Nevertheless, they have only a marginal role in European agriculture. Only 2.5% of European Union's arable land is covered by grain legumes. But there is a positive trend in Finland. We do have possibilities to solve the problems in cultivations. And if I understood right, weed management is one of the biggest problems in farming of legumes, at least grain legumes. Fred reminded us that we have to be patient. Uptake of novel crops is low and stepwise. Leopold Rittler talk about Soya. Donau Soya's vision is a sustainable, safe, and European protein supply. Soya is a key protein source in EU. A major part of soya, however, is consumed as compound feed in the European Union, and self-sufficiency ratio is very low, but there has been an increase in trend in harvesting area. Actually, harvesting area has been doubled over 8 years, so trend is increasing. And Leopold told us also that soya from Europe is a climate, or at least can be a climate friendly alternative. And we also learned that it's mainly GMO-free soya produced in Europe and in Russia and Ukraine. In Ulrich presentation, we learned that networking along the whole value chain can increase the production and also the demand of legumes. There is need for networking among farmers, but also other players in supply chain, like processors and market and retailers, so that there are many question marks has to be solved, and there is need to different solutions, and all the brains to solve those problems are needed. Developments in food production are drivers. Nowadays, soya is and legumes are very much used in feed in Europe. Actually, I have taken that picture also from organic farm, and it presents mixture of faba bean and cereal. So this kind of farming systems are common also already in Finland. Karen Hamann told us that the motivation to reduce meat and dairy consumption for environmental reasons is a very strong driver for plant-based products in Nordic countries. We have seen this also in Finland. Using pea protein or faba bean protein is big news. Global market demand for pulse protein is growing strongly. This is good. Lots of new products have come into the market, and many of those are meat alternatives. And innovation and supply chain organization are key factors for success. As earlier reminded in those presentations, considering farming issues of legumes. Finally, Anne-Maria told us that pulses should have a bigger role in our diet, and environmental friendly and healthy planetary healthy diet would double the consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts. And at least in Finland, we are not eating so much legumes yet. Largely, plant-based planetary healthy diet can be combined, considering also the food culture of the country. So this means that our planetary health and diet can be combined differently in different countries, taking into the account food culture and the realities of the production in different countries, which are really different even in Europe, in southern, from south to north of Europe. Okay, that was my summary, what I have learned today. I have learned a lot. It has been a very inspiring morning session today, and I would like to thank you all for attention. Thank you all for participating this webinar. And finally, I would like to say that let's work together for legumes. Legumes can offer us a lot, and yes, those are also healthy for us. Next, it will be time for lunch, and I hope that you are eating healthy and environmental friendly lunch. And some of you will participate afternoon session, which will be a workshop session, and that session will start 12:30. And you can use this same Zoom link to enter that session you have used in this morning to enter this morning session. So yes, this was my final slide, and I would like to thank you all. If some other has any comments, please, floor is yours. Maybe Fred, you could have one comment.
What can I say after all that? It's been a very interesting and diverse morning. We've covered a lot of issues, and there's a lot more issues to discuss. Whether it's how to produce the crops, how to produce the foods, how to persuade the general public to eat the foods, getting the foods into interesting things in restaurants. I've had lots of interesting vegan meals in restaurants. I myself have decided that when I go out to a restaurant, I'm going to try the vegan option to expand my horizons, and that's been quite fun. Legumes are going to be more and more interesting in the future, and I think we all have lots of nice research to do, which is not blue sky, not necessarily just blue skies research, but things to do that can change the world to be a better place. I hope.
Okay, that was yes. Thank you very much, Fred, and I hope you all have a very nice day today, and let's talk more about legumes next time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.